Hello, everybody. I'm very happy to have you here today. I'm Ben. I'm the CEO and co-founder at Melting Spot, and I'm also very happy to have Vicky together with me on this webinar today. Hi, Vicky. How are you?
Ben, I'm good. I'm excited to be here as well.
Okay, I'll let you introduce yourself in like a couple of seconds. We are live on this podcast or webinar dedicated to digital customer success and customer education. And that's the reason why I'm happy to have you with us today to discuss and to know a bit more about customer education. For those who are new here, and as a reminder, Melting Spot is a customer LMS. We help SaaS accelerate onboarding and product adoption through in-app learning journeys, combining live learning, social learning, and micro-learning. Today, as I said, we are welcoming Vicky. She's the CEO of Actus, and I'm just going to leave you introduce yourself because you're going to be much better than I am for that.
I don't know about that. I'm still trying to get my elevator pitch down, but it's great to be here. Yeah, so I've been working in the customer education space for quite a few years. Really came from a traditional education background, and over the last year and change, I've been specifically working through Actus, working with organizations on building and implementing and growing their own customer education. So my experience ranges from the practitioner side, the product side, the leadership side, and I love to just bring all that together and share what I've learned and also keep learning and do these kinds of chats and get the word out there about customer education.
Okay, how did you fall into this customer education thing? Like, how exactly? Is there an anecdote you can share, or?
Yeah, I think that would take our full half hour, but it's I think very few people actually specifically set out to get into customer education, mostly because it's still somewhat of an unknown path. And for me, I did work in higher education for the first 10 years of my career. And when I transitioned out of that, I worked in support roles for a while and product support and customer support roles, and then really just pivoted back into an education focus. So it's kind of like I brought that experience and that passion with me and sort of crafted my own roles. Over the course of my career, I really pitched and formed the roles that I took at companies for the most part. Very few were already developed. And so I've sort of built my career as I've gone and really just been kind of part of this growth of customer education. And I know we're going to get more into what that term even means.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I've actually worked on internal as well. I've overseen the enablement side, the L&D side. So I have a kind of a breadth of experience there. But the customer education piece is definitely one of the most interesting for me because of the nuances to it, which I know we'll get more into.
Okay, excellent. As you said, it's an unknown path. Customer education is an unknown path. I think it's also very much misunderstood. It's sometimes misunderstood with other concepts such as customer onboarding, customer training. It's interesting maybe to just take 2 minutes to explain what customer education is, or try to define what it is, and what is the main difference with customer training, for example, which is usually a misunderstanding.
Well, I think so. So there's words and there's words, right? Like, so training, enablement, education, in some ways are very similar words, and some people do refer to the function as customer training and customer enablement. I look at it more as education as a whole, and education has various ways and modalities of working. So training can be a very specific use. You're thinking more kind of almost hands-on training. But I think what's more important is just looking at customer education and what that really means in an organization. And even using the word customer is something I tend to balk at, because when we look at educating our end user, it's often customers, but it could also be prospects, it could be partners, and even internal employees. And so in a sense, we're talking more about our proprietary product or industry education or training or learning. And so some of the different terms that we use are, I think that like everyone has a kind of different concept of what training versus enablement versus education means. But I do think it's important to think about this holistic way that we are educating outward on our organization's, you know, stance, whether it's this is how we think we should do things in the industry, this is how we think you should use our product, this is how we think you should do your role. Like it's basically our like outward focus of education. And so I push back on the term customer education a little bit. But I think it's important to think about education as a whole in an organization and educating our different types of audience and end users.
Okay, so as a SaaS startup founder, I can see what customer education means and what kind of impact this strategy can have on my business. But what about large corporates? I know you have a wide range of clients or of customers. You have corporates, SaaS companies. So is it really done for every company, or is it a strategy that is limited to a certain type of company?
Yeah, I do think we hear a lot about customer education in SaaS, and there's a lot of that, and certainly is very relevant for SaaS, for many SaaS companies. But my experience is actually probably more outside of the SaaS world and the larger enterprises, and also we can get outside of the tech and software space as well, and it's really relevant for a lot of different types of companies. Ultimately, education is a strategy to achieve different results, and so it really just depends on, does your business need that? Is there a gap there where education could solve for expanding your market, or for improving your customer retention, or for improving your partner program? And so it's less about like whether it's SaaS or not. The SaaS conversation is really, there's a lot more ability to connect metrics with the SaaS product. So it's like a different approach to doing things when it's a different kind of company, but it doesn't mean that it's not relevant. So it's really just about, is education the right approach to solving for different business problems that you have?
Okay, can you share any examples of larger companies or corporates or public organizations that actually changed the way their business or had an impact on their business thanks to customer education?
I just don't want to, like, I have clients I work with, but I don't necessarily want to name drop the clients I work with.
Just don't give the name, maybe just the use case or.
Yeah, well, there's clients in, or there's organizations, I should say, in, I mean, in any space. So, in the software space, with cloud software. So in a sense, you could say it's similar to SaaS, but it's just at a much larger scale. And so that's, really about educating. Essentially, there's a big picture view of educating, even in like K through 12 or higher education, where you're educating students towards using this software, so that as the over long term, essentially, this is going to be driving more of a market share. So it's an interesting approach to kind of this big. I think an enterprise has like a big picture and sort of its opportunity to do this very long term approach with education. So there's that. My direct experience, I used to work for Amazon, so I could speak a bit about what it was like to work at Amazon. But that's also like, in an organization like that, you have all the different business units that are all doing education for different purposes. So really, I could talk to you about what different enterprises are doing, but there's common threads with what all of them are doing, which is educating the market at large. So either educating prospects or just people in general, to build credibility and to build a sense of essentially credibility and brand awareness. And then also just educating customers, as we all know, like to drive onboarding and to reduce churn and things like that. So all these themes that are really, we talk a lot about in the SaaS space, are relevant in larger businesses as well. And again, relevant outside of software, the software space, and manufacturing, government, like a lot of these different spaces need education for those purposes.
Okay, excellent. And if you're willing to launch a customer education program, what are the key steps you should follow, or are there any key steps that are generic to every business?
Yeah, I mean, so just to kind of keep repeating that, it's like understanding the business problem you're solving. So I think that sometimes I see a misstep where an organization may be like, oh, we need to just launch customer education because our competitor has it, or everyone does an academy, so let's get an academy out there, which is a great like kind of initial momentum to get started. But then the next step should be, why? What are we building it for? What problem are we solving with it? Or what opportunity are we solving with it? And that should always be your
What
first step.
metrics are we willing to impact?
Well, exactly. I think then that connects, hand in hand. So if our problem is, okay, we want to penetrate this whole new market and they don't really know or understand what we do or why it's important. So let's build an educational certification program, for example, that targets that problem. And then your metric comes along with solving that problem, right? So it should always start with why and the purpose we're doing it, and not just doing it for the sake of like, let's build an education program.
Okay. And the main reason why sometimes I can hear organizations a bit or slowing down on this customer education topic is about it's the complexity of creating content, because behind this customer education concept there is a clear need to create a whole lot of content, educational content. Do you think it's so complex, or how should organizations organize on this content topic? Any advice on that?
Well, I'm going to say something that may or may not be popular. I think it is incredibly important that if you're launching, if you want to launch and build an impactful, effective education program, that you either hire the right people that have that skill set, or you invest in upskilling whoever you're tasking that with to learn that skill set. Because building this kind of content is not like every kind of content's the same, because somebody could be really great at building certain kinds of marketing content that doesn't just immediately transition to effective curriculum and instructional design. So I think one of the things that sometimes trips organizations up is, okay, so now we're building content to train our customers or to educate our customers. So let's just, create more of the same kind of content for that purpose. And it doesn't quite work that way. Because if you don't build effective education and you don't have some sense of, actually like teaching objectives and reaching those outcomes, then you end up with a lot of content that isn't necessarily driving the results you want. So it's a totally different game. And I think what I see some organizations kind of, getting challenged with is who they're supposed, who they're hiring and who they're expecting to do that kind of work. And again, I'm not saying that no one from other roles can transition to that, but there should be a purposeful, investment in upskilling and learning what curriculum is and what instructional design principles are and why this matters in building an education program.
Okay, and that those resources should always be internally, or can you outsource the content creation tasks?
Yeah, well, you could definitely outsource. And given that I launched the company doing some of this, I'm certainly going to plug myself for a second in it. But there are a lot of the organizations and agencies that build content. What is important is that there's an owner internally. There has to be an owner. They can't just be like somebody.
And usually, who is the owner of this kind of program? Is it marketing or?
Oh, it's all over the place, which is a whole nother webinar we could get into. But
what's your recommendation if someone is about to launch such a program? Is it best to host the program under the marketing team, or communication, or?
I'm going to drop one of my blog posts about that in the chat, because I feel like that again is like a whole other thing. And I've written a few things on organizational design. I will say, so it's commonly, let me drop that in here. So it's commonly in customer success, as you might imagine. It's also in marketing sometimes. It's sometimes even in product. And if people are selling it, it's sometimes in professional services. So it doesn't have a super consistent home. My recommendation, when possible, is that it stands aside, like alongside these, and is not, it's not siloed within a department, because customer education in general can have such a reach across different initiatives. It can drive sales, it can drive marketing, it can drive product, it can drive customer, it can drive all these different things. So embedding it too much in one of these will basically keep it limited. So in an ideal scenario, especially if you're a small enough company that you're starting out, you could have this function alongside these other functions. I just actually was speaking to someone earlier who runs the education and reports directly to the CEO. which is fantastic. And that's what I've done as well in my in one of my roles in the past. And so I think that really is the optimal. But today we do see it embedded in a lot of different organizations. So I mean, just to kind of go back, like it's just really important that there is someone internally that is owning the business strategy of the education. And then if they don't have the skill set of instructional design and curriculum design, you could certainly work with people like myself to build that out.
Okay, great. What about the timeline? Like, can you? Well, as you know, we are all working on very short-term targets.
Yes.
How much time does it take to build an effective customer education program? And like, do you need 6 months, a year to start getting results, or can it be shorter than that?
Yeah, I mean, I have a package essentially where I implement and launch within 3 to 4 months for an organization.
Okay.
I could tell you what that looks like. The most important
Yep.
thing is taking the first week or two to align on that strategy. And that's always, I mean, if we skip that and we just start building, it will always come back to haunt you essentially. So you take that first week to 2 weeks to really align on the purpose, what are we doing and why, and understanding essentially the metrics that, as you mentioned, the metrics that are influencing the audience segmentation. So getting that down, that doesn't mean that we have to then build immediately all of it. It just means that we know what we're building and why. Then we can get really targeted. And typically what I do is I start with a targeted learning experience to drive, one of the problems that we're solving. It could be anywhere from 3 to 5 courses with multiple lessons. It also, like, your modalities may change. You may do something on demand, or you may have an opportunity to just do, like workshops and virtual things that way. So what you build and why will vary, but essentially just getting really clear on what you're doing, and then the outcomes you're trying to drive as that connects back to the behavior you're trying to change, and then building the courses from there. So I have a very fast process personally where I work with that. And it's just, there's an iterative process to that. The other thing to note with education is it is a fluid medium. So unlike other types of content, like no one's really going back and updating a blog post, for example, like maybe rarely you see that. But once you have certain other types of marketing content out there, it's out there. It's not usually like living material, whereas educational content is really like living. And so you have a course out there and you update that course based off feedback and based off changes. And so it's a different kind of medium where it doesn't have to all be perfect immediately. It's really about getting out there the first experience, the targeted experience, and getting some results from that so you can start iterating.
Okay. You're talking about courses, for example. What are the preferred formats in terms of educational content? Because it can be like documents, it can be articles. When we talk about customer education, what are we talking exactly about? Is it about online courses, micro learning, documents, webinars? What are the preferred formats when it comes to customer education?
And I know we don't have time, unfortunately, for me to like go through my whole spiel of how I look at this, but it completely varies going back to what we're building and why. Right. So we have essentially, like, customer education is not a big box. It's just an umbrella term for different types of educational programs and initiatives that may occur. Right. So we may have a problem where we see a lot of our customers getting stuck using certain parts of the product. For that, we may solve it with something like, focused tutorials or a help center where they can like go in and pull the answers that they need to get unstuck. So that could be an article, it could be a short video, like, that's specifically for that. For another problem or opportunity, maybe we have the opportunity to, I mentioned before, like increase a new market segment, and we want to get the word out there about our solutions. We could build something that's more of like a industry certification. So that would be like on-demand courses and lessons that ladder up to an exam, a badge certification or certificate. So it really depends. It's like, what are we doing and who are we doing it for? And then you choose your modality, you choose your delivery method. So I have this approach where I start first with the program strategy, and then we look at the audience strategy, and then the content strategy, and then the delivery strategy. And that follows these things so that you're not just trying to buy tech or implement a technology without having clarity on, what you're building and who you're building it for.
Okay. And so I have plenty of questions. One is about gamification. How much is it important when talking about customer education? Is it important to have gamification together or alongside customer education programs? What about certification as well? Is it like key to offer a certification at the end of the program, or can you live without a certification?
Yeah, so both of those are tactics, and use or non-use of them is dependent on who we're training and for what purpose, right? And that's why we have to understand the personas. So certification, for example, is really relevant in certain industries for certain personas. You know, like I worked a lot in ad tech, and in the advertising space, it's very common for agencies and for employees at those agencies to collect certifications. In IT as well, like you're going to get your Microsoft and your AWS, and you're going to get these certifications. And so certain industries and certain personas are going to be really drawn to achieving a certification. That's not the case everywhere. And it comes down to understanding the motivations of your persona, of why they would want to achieve that, and what it would do for your business as well. And same with gamification. I mean, that's a pretty large umbrella term that can mean a lot of things. And, it could just mean like you're getting levels or badges or coins or whatever. It could also be other types of incentivification there. And it just, again, goes back to, what are you incentivizing? Does that fit into your strategy? And does it fit into with what your persona is looking for? So both of those are tactics. And I think really the primary answer is, it's just super important to have that clarity on who you are educating and what they want out of that education and what you are driving for your business. And then your tactics, as far as what modality you choose, whether you choose certification or a different kind of badge, or you do a gamification, or you do something else, all of that is the tactics that you use to execute towards what you're trying to do.
Okay, excellent. I have a question regarding the tool, because we're talking about plenty of tactics and content. And so do you need many tools or a full stack to deliver customer education to your customers? Or, well, I mean, is it complicated, or you just need 1-2 tools? What's your advice or piece of advice regarding the stack?
I mean, I've always been very scrappy. I know there's certainly a lot of tools out there that you can do the content development and authoring and hosting in one. So there's a few. And then I would say, like, your bare minimum. I mean, and also it's going to depend again on your modality. Like, are you doing
What's the minimum?
Some IoT? Well, your bare minimum is you're going to need something to create graphics, typically. So some people use Canva or Photoshop or whatever it is, but like you need to have an access to creating some graphics, even if they're somewhat scrappy. But typically, it's difficult to do education without some level of graphic design there. Typically, some type of video, whether you're using AI tools. I know there's a lot of AI tools out there right now. And also for graphics as well. But some way to do some video or audio. And again, these could be outsourced if you're working with people. But if you're doing it in-house, and then you have to have if you're doing e-learning, you have to have the authoring tool that can build and deliver the e-learning. If you're not doing e-learning, you would do something through Zoom or another kind of video conferencing tool to deliver that. And then, of course, the hosting. A lot of businesses do build either an in-house hosting platform, but of course there's a lot out there, right? Like, so we have the different hosting platforms. And I think one thing, again, we could talk another webinar on this, but there's a big difference between a learning management system or platform and other types of content management platforms. And so sometimes people kind of get tripped up on that as well, of like, well, we have content, let's put it on this platform. But there's a lot that an LMS brings to the table that is not the same in other platforms. And that's everything from delivering a learning experience. And that goes back to understanding what a learning experience really is, and what curriculum is. So delivering the learning experience and being able to track those analytics in a unique way that's beyond just the engagement piece, but it's assessment and other things. So I mean, I'm sure that there's more I'm not thinking of. I tend to be pretty scrappy, especially when I'm working with organizations that want to test out the efficacy or the impact that an education program could have. I would never go in there and be like, okay, let's start with $1 million budget and buy all the software that we need, because we need to just start with where we are. And a lot of these things I mentioned are already at an organization. Like, you probably already have some kind of design software, some basic video editing software, but the e-learning space and the LMS are going to be the unique things that that you want to consider for education.
Because how much is the experience important when it comes to customer education as an end user or as a customer? If you deliver a kind of seamless customer experience or customer education experience, it's going to be easier for me to follow the line. I mean, to follow the program. If it's a little bit all over the place, it might actually be a bit more complicated for me to engage with the education program. So how do you make sure you offer a proper experience to the customer to deliver the best level of engagement? Are there any piece of advice as well you can share?
Yes, the first one is starting with that strategy and starting with a look at your organization to try to create a holistic approach, because one of the things you just mentioned is, it could be all over the place. And that's something that we see pretty commonly as an organization, as a company, expands and grows. There will frequently become multiple teams that are building educational content. So you may have like your help articles in one place and some e-learning somewhere else, and somebody's doing webinars somewhere else. And as a customer, it's really hard to understand, what am I supposed to do? Do I go find this webinar? Do I go do this in-app thing? Like, what is the actual experience? So a customer doesn't know that you have 7 teams internally building things. They just know what they're trying to achieve. So really having a holistic approach, in an ideal scenario, you have one team, one dream, but even if you have multiple teams, having at least a coherent and consistent strategy to deliver that, and to deliver that in a coherent way, will be incredibly impactful, and will also allow you to measure results of that, because it's really hard to measure the results when you have just disparate things going on all over your platform and all over your websites. You want to have some consistency to know that your customer has a consistent onboarding education, or a consistent, ongoing training to do XYZ. So yeah, I mean, I know I always say the same things whenever anyone hears me, but having a clear strategy up front and a unified strategy is a game changer that, I really want to see more companies think about.
Okay. Talking about return on investment of such a strategy, where is customer education best? Is it in the marketing space to activate new growth tactics, for example, or is it in the customer success / account management space? Where is it going to be the most efficient?
Yeah, so that's the article that I posted that I saw that Julia shared here. So again, ideal scenario, it's directly going to the CEO, because it has so much that it could support. Second up, though, is really looking at what is the biggest impact the business has. So if your biggest area of opportunity is to use education to drive more of your market, then put it in marketing. If your biggest opportunity is to drive,
But okay, my question was more: in which space are we gonna reach the more results? Is it in the marketing space? And should we use customer education as a growth tool, or is it in the customer success and retention space as a customer success tool?
It just depends on, I mean, that's organization specific, right? Like, it's what the opportunity is. So for some organization, it may be that education is going to be more impactful driving customer initiatives, but if education isn't a giant gap, and also some organizations may be using more managed service and not self-service, so they don't necessarily need it there. So it's not I can't answer that with it's always marketing or it's always customer success. It really just depends on what the business is seeing and where the area of opportunity is going to be the most for that business.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're almost at the end of this webinar, but I have one question regarding the trends in this customer education space. Can you see any emerging trends or new practices that are going to impact the customer education space?
Well, I mean, new practices, everyone is doing more and more AI. And I'm actually quite impressed with some of the AI videos, because for a while I was avoiding them, and now I'm seeing more of them. So of course there's that. And then, trends, it's hard for me to answer that because I'm always trying to push and force and start the trends. So, I have seen more conversation around organizational design, but that may be because I'm starting on those conversations, and I'm seeing more people think about where the education team sits. So that goes back to the question you just asked: where is it best, and how is it structured? And I think that we're seeing more of an understanding of how important that is for the efficacy of it, for the impact of it, and for the use, for business strategy. So I'll say that just because I think, that's what I'm seeing. But again, I may be biased in that I'm pushing that narrative. But I think some of the trends are some of the same stuff that we've been seeing, which is more focused on ROI and more focused on the business strategy, which is great because that's what we want to see it moving towards.
Okay, great. As a conclusion, maybe what would be your one single practical advice for getting started? If you had just one single advice you would share, which one is it?
To take a minute, and I don't mean weeks, months, years, to take like a day, a couple days, to really do a dive into seeing where and how education would serve the business, and to think about that strategic element. And once you have that clarity, the rest of it can start falling into place really quickly. So it's always going to be starting with that. It's not even a full needs analysis. It's just like almost, like a gut check of, hey, what are we seeing here? What are the trends? Maybe we see something going on the marketing side or the customer side or the product side. And we can start from there to really understand what we're doing and why. So that's always going to be my advice, is to have clarity on your
Take
purpose.
a minute.
Yeah. Just take a, I mean, honestly, like I think people bristle at the word strategy because it sounds like we're talking about this very long, drawn out process that's not going to get us anywhere. And it's so not the case. It's like building a house without a blueprint. You got to know what you're doing and why, and like where all the pieces go. And so I think it's really, really important. It doesn't have to take forever, but just take a minute in the beginning to have clarity on what you're doing and why.
Okay, thanks for that. Thanks a lot, Vicky. We're gonna have to stop this webinar.
Yeah.
We're gonna share your website in the chats. We're gonna share as well your LinkedIn profile. So if anybody wants to reach out, I guess they can write to you on LinkedIn, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks a lot. I was very happy to share these insightful discussion with you. And well, I wish you a very good day because you're on the other side of the Atlantic. And most of our audience is here in Europe. So I'll be happy to keep talking with you about customer education in the coming days, weeks, months. Thanks a lot, Vicky.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. Bye to everybody.